1. Crime. Why did James and Raskolnikov commit murder? Let's start with James. James's wife Mary was suffering from a terminal illness. Given 3 years to live by her doctor, she couldn't handle the stress of knowing her days were numbered. Mary succumbed to the torment, lashing out at James due to her deep rage. She felt bitter and defeated. It was simultaneously so that James grew hatred in his heart for Mary, despising her, and ultimately he took his deepest pains out on her, as she previously did for him. James's selfishness took over him in that moment. In that morally destitute state of mind, James murdered Mary. He resented Mary for taking his life away from him. All he wanted was his life back. No more hospitals, no more bitter wife. He could date women again and feel pleasure again without any chains holding him back. James tried to believe a delusion that he was acting with moral righteousness. Mary told him she wanted her suffering to end, so naturally James had the right to oblige. But depending on which of the 3 original endings you get, James either admits this isn't true in the leave ending, or Mary shrieks at him for wanting her out of the way in the Maria ending. Did Mary beg for death? Yes. Mary was suffering from the pains of grief. She probably did think of dying plenty of times. But that doesn't mean James is in the right. If you watch the leave ending, James admits that she also begged to stay alive. And in the Maria ending, you get a full picture, as Mary scolding him shows him that he killed her for his own selfish desires.
That's why you needed this Maria person? James, do you really think I could ever forgive you for what you did?
Silent Hill 2's gameplay mechanics add immersion and help reinforce the narrative's quality in a way that Crime and Punishment isn't quite capable of doing. This helps James punch above his literary weight class into a tragic character worth analyzing. James is roughly just as clunky as any other character operating with tank controls. James also has to double tap enemies with a swift kick in the noggin before he can rest assured that said enemy is truly dead. Think about James's battles with Pyramid Head. At no time throughout Silent Hill 2 is James ever able to kill Pyramid Head. Think about that. All these gameplay functions tell a ludo narrative that James has a frail mind, which perfectly lines up with the story's intended narrative. Not only do players get to see James, they also get to be James. They also receive a huge catharsis when they finally uncover the truth about James's murder. This is just one reason why Silent Hill 2 continues to resonate just as well with players decades after release. Silent Hill 2 is a gem of a case study in ludonarrative unity. Each game mechanic was created to be an extension of the narrative, so that we could further step into James's shoes. So then, why would you want to have people experience being a murderer? And why not a soldier, but an average man who murdered an innocent woman, his own loving wife to be exact? It might be safer to mark James as other, or transgressor, or bad person from an evolutionary standpoint. Other equals bad. Bad equals threat. Threat must be eliminated before it eliminates me. Anyone's capable of becoming James after all. It's better to be safe than sorry, especially if you have a family. That pretext is hard to maintain the longer you play as James, and Silent Hill 2 makes sure we never forget it. Silent Hill's mystical ability to manifest the subconscious, full of suppressed desires, thoughts, and fears, means that discussing the context of what occurs in the town will be by nature psychological. Just like the dilemma of the artist painting the devil, the only way to obtain new intrinsic perspectives is to gather the courage to stare into the abyss, or to step into the mystical town of Silent Hill, walking in James's shoes and empathizing with his motivations. Now, let's take a look at Rhodium, Ramanovich, Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov, on the other hand, committed 2 murders, both for different reasons, and both providing different context into the situation in Raskolnikov's mind. His first murder, the old pawnbroker Elena Ivanovna, was premeditated just as James's murder was. Raskolnikov was impoverished, starving unless otherwise fed by his landlord's assistant. He wanted money to pay for necessities like food and rent. But Raskolnikov is also a young intellectual, and unfortunately, a law school dropout since he couldn't pay tuition. He could use more money to follow his studies. He wished to help his family, as his sister is marrying into wealth, and Raskolnikov sees his sister as legally prostituting herself to help save her family's financial condition. While pondering the murder in his head, Raskolnikov tries to rationalize the murder as a justified benefit to society. He claims the pawnbroker is a louse who harms others by swindling them. The swindler label is sadly true, but calling another human a louse is a pretty questionable claim. He further poses that killing her would provide a quantifiable decrease in the amount of bad in the world, which seems very utilitarian in belief. He also poses that killing her increases the overall happiness in the world, which is also utilitarian in nature, as well as a morally based justification of murder. Luckily, or unluckily, for Raskolnikov, Dostoevsky sets up a series of fated encounters for the young murderer that by sheer chance give rise to his inner demons. These encounters provide additional context outside of Raskolnikov's mind into why the murders occurred. While in the tavern at the Haymarket, Raskolnikov overhears a group of young punks justifying the murder of the pawnbroker, literally the exact act he is wrapped up in thought over. They claim it would be a moral service, even of some utility, as they could reinvest their newfound wealth back into society, lifting up the poor and helping those in need. Once committed to the deadly act of murdering the pawnbroker, Raskolnikov's description changes completely. His body moves on its own, mechanically, as if not in the same mind at that point as he was before nor after the murder. Somehow, through possession almost, the dangerous ideology Raskolnikov ponders all throughout Book 1 of 6 in Crime and Punishment has taken control of him, almost as if the ideology is in control of the acts, moving through Raskolnikov as it devours its prey. After the murder, Raskolnikov appears to re-enter his body, becoming one with his thoughts and feelings again. Once in his own mind again, Raskolnikov freaks. He frantically searches Illyana's body for her keys and rummages clumsily through her belongings. Since he overslept and additionally took too long while rummaging, he stopped dead in his tracks by the woman's sister, Lisaveta, who is unluckily cut down and met with her unfortunate demise. Adding to unlucky chance, a couple fellow customers of the pawnbroker come to do business after the crimes, trapping Raskolnikov inside the pawnbroker's dwelling. One leaves for help as he suspects trouble immediately, and the other abandons his post at the door as he gets anxious waiting. By sheer chance again, Raskolnikov can escape. The two men miss Raskolnikov by mere seconds as another lucky chance arrives, and he takes advantage of the bumbling painters arguing a few rooms over. He sneaks into the dwelling as the painters have left the room in the heat of a dispute. The first two men getting help never saw him. As Raskolnikov escaped, Dostoevsky dances along a fine line, questioning whether Raskolnikov was fully responsible for his acts. Future chapters of Crime and Punishment show his punishment, implying his responsibility naturally. Dostoevsky paints a more complex picture than just Raskolnikov's mistakes, though. Why did so many chance encounters play towards Raskolnikov's successful murder and escape from the crime scene? I dare to ask then, why was Raskolnikov aided by fate to succeed and escape? If you don't believe in fate, then another version might pose, why was Raskolnikov aided by chance to succeed? This is a book after all. It was written intentionally with this in mind. The scene of the murder, before, during, and immediately after, feels full of breadth, yet simple in its realism, not overworked. Written in similar fashion as how Sargent might have painted the scene. Through the simplicity, the young, bi-posed murderer is still written so ambiguously at the same time. Are we meant to empathize more with him if he's split? Maybe. I think both are true and at play during their own key moments of Crime and Punishment. Raskolnikov truly felt possessed by his extremist thoughts to the point of being brainwashed into a mindless monster like a zombie during the act most cruel. This enticed me as I'm left wondering just how easily this could happen to you or to me or my family or my husband. Am I in danger? Are they? The modern world is now home to the most expansive platform for voicing free speech, the internet. From beautiful acts of humanity, such as donating to charities and live-streamed education, to evil forums on how to commit vile acts of crime. It's easier than ever to find an echo chamber for your belief system. Dostoevsky intentionally makes the line of transgression blurry in order for us to turn towards ourselves and play out his dark fantasy within our own minds, to examine what we might have done in Raskolnikov's shoes. Could you really commit murder?